My best friend's fiancé tried to ban me from using her nickname, and 4 texts later, his engagement was in shambles. My best friend's fiancé, 31M, isn't a fan of the nickname I gave her. She's 28F, same as me. Apparently, he's decided that now that they're engaged, should stop using it. I have no idea how to politely tell him that's not happening. So here's the situation, I'm 28, my best friend is 28, and her fiancé is 31. They just got engaged last week, and I'm supposed to be her maid of honor, yay for me. Her fiancé? He's alright. We're not super close or anything, but he seems decent enough. He's a bit of an awkward nerd, the type who doesn't really open up unless you get him talking about whatever niche topic he's into at the moment, his job, his favorite TV show, that kind of thing. And once he does start talking, the conversation tends to turn into a one-man show. Meanwhile, my best friend and I go way back. We've been tight since we were 15. Years before she even met her fiancé, we watched The Wire together, and it became our show. Somewhere along the way, I started calling her Mia, a mix of her first initial and a nod to a character we both loved. It stuck, and now it's just what I call her. Then, out of nowhere, I get this very unexpected Facebook message from her fiancé last night. He tells me, in a painfully polite way, that since he and M are about to be married, he'd appreciate it if I stopped using that nickname. Apparently, he finds it immature and doesn't want me saying it during my maid of honor speech. Oh, and as a bonus, he never liked the nickname in the first place because, get this, the character it comes from gets murdered in the show, and he doesn't want that kind of association with his future wife. I'm not exactly known for my diplomacy, so I have no clue how to respond. Part of me thinks I should just ignore it. Another part of me is itching to reply with something like, sure thing, bro, no problem. I'll just start calling her Kai instead. Or Leo. Oh, maybe Zane, that'd suit her. And then there's the more chaotic side of me that wants to smile and nod, agree to his request, and then absolutely hammer that nickname into my wedding speech. Like, really commit. Make it a drinking game for the guests. And, yeah, I'll admit, there's also a slightly pissed off part of me that wants to fire back with, are you serious? No. Absolutely not. Request denied. I'll take care of it myself. Don't ever try to dictate how I talk to my best friend. Something about the way he worded his message rubbed me the wrong way, too. He kept referring to her as, my future wife, and, my fiancé, like she was a possession instead of a person with, you know, her own opinions. My best friend is fiercely independent. I doubt she'd appreciate being talked about like that. So maybe I should just forward her the message and be like, your fiancé sent me this, and I genuinely don't know what to do with it. At one point, we even discussed dating, but honestly, while we love each other, I don't think we've ever been in love with each other. We're just really different people, which makes us fantastic friends but probably terrible romantic partners. The last time we even talked about the idea of dating was, 8 years ago? And now that I think about it, maybe that's what's actually fueling his weird demand. I'm about 99% sure my best friend has zero issue with me calling her M. She's never been shy about telling me when I annoy her, so if she didn't like it, I'd already know. But if her fiancé does have some underlying insecurity about our history, well, that would explain a lot. Anyway, I just got off the phone with M. She called me, and out of sheer habit, I started to greet her the way I always do, sup, M? But then I caught myself and, mid-word, tried to awkwardly pivot to her full name, which just made it sound weird as hell. The moment she heard it, she immediately went, he told you to stop calling me M, didn't he? I told her yeah. Her response? What the fuck? I cannot believe he actually fucking did that. Look, I gotta go, but don't stop calling me M. You got it, M. And that was that. So. Yeah. Somebody just crossed the line. The wedding coup, my best friend's fiancé went full dictator, and now he's probably single. Em and her older brother have always been close, so naturally, she wanted him as part of her bridal party. I guess that would technically make him a Brie-Mayaman? Or something. Whatever. Not important. What is important is the message her brother received from her fiancé. Out of nowhere, he was informed that he'd been booted from the bridal party because the wedding was going to be traditional, and he would be replaced by the fiancé's sister. The sister, by the way, lives across the country and has met Em a grand total of maybe 4 times. And it didn't stop there. Another one of Em's Brie-Maya maids? Kicked to the curb as well. Why? Because she has short hair, a nose ring, and some small but visible tattoos. Apparently, unless she adjusted her appearance to be more presentable, she wasn't wedding material. And then there was me. I guess he couldn't dig up anything against me, so instead, I just got a lecture about my terrible choice in nicknames. Lucky me. Em had no idea any of this was happening. She was just hanging out at home, totally unaware, when her brother called her like, "What the actual hell is going on?" Naturally, she was confused. At first, she thought he was joking. Then he forwarded her the message. That's when she called her fiancé. He was out with friends, so she demanded an explanation. And, incredibly, he calmly admitted that yes, he had messaged her brother, and also the rest of the bridal party, to let them know his oh-so-logical reasons for replacing and rejecting them. Right on cue, her phone started blowing up with texts and calls, especially from her cousin, who was understandably livid after being told to leave her wife behind like some kind of dirty secret. Em didn't hesitate. She cut her fiancé off mid-explanation, told him, "You need to come home right now," and hung up. Then she spent some time calming her cousin down, called me for our quick but very enlightening conversation, and then reached out to her tattooed friend to let her know what was up. Meanwhile, half an hour had passed since she'd first told her fiancé to come home. And guess what? He still hadn't. So she called again. "Where are you? Get home. Now." And this guy, had the absolute gall to say, "No. I'm out with my friends. I'll come back when I feel like it." And then, because he was determined to make things even worse, he added, "You're being emotional right now. I expect you to stop acting like a child by the time I get back." She was so furious she just hung up. Eventually, he finally dragged his ass home, and the moment he walked through the door, she let him have it. And what was his brilliant defense? "You're being irrational. You need to think logically about this." To which she basically responded, "What the actual fuck are you talking about? There was nothing rational or logical about any of what you did." And then, of course, he started in with the whole weddings aren't just about the bride's spiel. Now, Em is not the kind of person who thinks a wedding should be all about her. She genuinely believes in bringing people together and celebrating love with family and friends. But his issue wasn't about balance, it was about controlling who her family and friends were allowed to be in front of his. What about his professional reputation? What would his parents think if they saw her friend with the piercings? For the record, she has one small nose ring. And then, this part still makes my brain short-circuit, he mentioned me. Specifically, how he couldn't have me calling her some ridiculous black name during the wedding speech. Excuse me? A what now? A black name? He actually said that. At that point, Em was so furious she tried to throw him out of the apartment. But instead of leaving, he just sighed like she was the exhausting one, plopped himself on the couch, and went, "You're being completely ridiculous right now. I'm not leaving. You need to calm down." So she left instead. As she was packing, he just kept sighing dramatically from across the apartment, occasionally tossing out a "calm down" or "stop being so irrational" in her direction. And then she walked out. The second she left, she called me, fuming, and asked if she could come over. Obviously, I said yes. When she arrived, she unloaded everything that had happened. At one point, while we were talking, she just covered her face with her hands and started sobbing. She admitted she'd known for a while that things weren't great between them. All he did anymore was work, hang out with his equally obnoxious friends, come home, watch CNN or MSNBC, and sleep. Their conversations had become painfully one-sided. He would talk endlessly about something he cared about, and whenever she tried to shift the conversation to something else, he'd just wait for her to stop, then continue as if she hadn't said a word. He never helped around the apartment, because cleaning wasn't as important to him as it was to her, so obviously, she should do it. And Mia, it's just going to get messy again anyway, so what's the point? He stopped holding her hand in public. If she was upset about something, he always found some excuse to leave. I mean, the list went on. The dude was just a selfish, thoughtless, condescending asshole. And honestly, I always got a weird vibe from him. Like I said in my last post, it was exhausting to get him to talk unless the topic was something he was personally obsessed with. But I didn't realize just how deep his dickishness went. They texted back and forth last night and this morning, and it was more of the same. Stop this. You're being childish. Come home. She told him she wasn't being childish, there were major problems in their relationship, and she didn't think they could move forward without some serious premarital counseling. And at this rate, there might not be a wedding to worry about at all. The beginning of the end, and the best kind of support system. His response? Fine. Now, are you coming home tonight? That was it. No acknowledgement of anything she'd said. No willingness to discuss. Just that. It took her hours to even think about responding. The second she read the text, she curled up on my couch, knees to her chest, and let out this deep, tired sigh. Then she whispered, I really don't want to go back to that apartment. Later, she admitted something that had been weighing on her. Even if they did go to premarital counseling, she didn't believe it would change anything. She could already picture him sitting there, convinced he was the smartest person in the room, twisting the therapist's words to try and make her feel like the irrational one. So I asked, does that mean the wedding's not happening? And that was it, she just broke down. Immediately, I regretted asking. I felt awful. I shouldn't have put it out there like that. I pulled her into a hug, apologizing over and over, telling her, it's okay, it's okay. You don't have to answer that right now. Eventually, she calmed down. For now, she decided she needed another night away from him, so she texted him to let him know. He didn't reply. At some point, my curiosity got the better of me, and I asked if she thought his weird message to me had anything to do with the fact that she and I had hooked up in the past. And then she started crying again. That was the moment it fully hit her. She had never felt comfortable enough to tell her own fiancé something so fundamental about herself. She whispered, that's probably a sign this relationship was screwed from the start, huh? Yeah. Yeah, it probably was. We both took the day off work. Call it a mental health break. We spent it the way any two emotionally exhausted people should, eating ungodly amounts of ice cream, day drinking, and binging Parks and Rec like it was our job. We took a long walk, during which she talked and cried a lot. And all day long, her bridal party, her brother included, kept reaching out, checking in, making sure she was okay. At first, she wasn't sure she could face them. She was embarrassed. Not about him, but about how everything had spiraled. She didn't want to see the people she loved and have to explain what had happened. I shut that down immediately. She had nothing to be embarrassed about. None of this mess was her fault. This was his bullshit, not hers. It took a little more convincing, along with promises of more alcohol and an ice cream stockpile, but eventually, she agreed to let them come over. When her cousin walked in with her wife, Em burst into tears again, apologizing to them over and over. They told her it wasn't necessary, that none of it was her fault, but she still apologized. She needed them to know she never would have let that happen if she'd known. Tonight, she's staying with her brother. I told her she could crash at my place as long as she wanted, but, well, his house actually has guest rooms, whereas my tiny one-bedroom apartment barely has space for the both of us. Right now, he's in the kitchen making her favorite meal. Their fridge is packed with at least 20 pints of Ben and Jerry's. The wine and vodka situation is borderline excessive. Meanwhile, back at my place, Parks and Rec is still playing in the background. We're all piled on the couch with her, a tangle of blankets, pillows, and way too many people for my tiny living room. She's wrapped up like a burrito, and at one point earlier, I dumped an entire basket of stuffed animals on her head just to make her laugh. And it worked. At the end of the day, that's all we're trying to do, show up, be there for her, and remind her she's not alone. My sister slept with my husband while I was pregnant, because she was jealous of my life. I'm 34, a new mom, and still trying to wrap my head around everything that's changed. Motherhood has brought so many emotions, but the most unexpected shift? My marriage. I've been married for 2 years. Ethan and I always had a solid relationship, at least, I thought we did. But ever since I got pregnant, it feels like we've been drifting apart. We weren't planning to have a baby, but when I saw those 2 pink lines, I was happy. I felt like it was the perfect time, my age, our financial stability, everything lined up. We had our own place, we were both earning well. Sure, we had responsibilities. Ethan was saving up to buy a house for his parents, and I was working towards starting a business, but responsibilities never stop. If we waited for the perfect moment, we'd be waiting forever. But when I told Ethan, his reaction wasn't what I expected. He said he was happy, but he just seemed off. Like he was more shocked than excited. Throughout my pregnancy, his behavior was all over the place. Some days, he was unbelievably sweet, wouldn't even let me lift a glass. Other days? It was like I didn't exist. He barely checked on me. And I had a rough pregnancy. Severe nausea, migraines, indigestion, you name it, I had it for all 40 weeks. Ethan wasn't mean to me, but he wasn't really there for me either. Like, I had to go to my OB/GYN appointments alone for the first 5 months. When I finally snapped and told him he was being careless, he was just like, well, you never asked me to come. Do I need to ask? I've always been independent. I don't rely on Ethan for everything. But this wasn't about me handling things myself, this was about us. And every time I confronted him about his lack of involvement, his response was always, you take care of your stuff on your own. If you needed me, why didn't you say so? It got under my skin. I vented to my friends, and they told me to stop expecting too much. They reminded me that social media is not reality, that those adorable pregnancy videos where husbands dote on their wives? Not the standard. So I tried to adjust. I told myself to manage my expectations. I focused on getting through the pregnancy with as few fights as possible. Then, after what felt like an eternity, I finally gave birth to my little girl. And I really thought Ethan would step up. At first, he seemed happy. He held the baby, spent time with her. But with me? He was distant. Cold. I was dealing with so much, the brutal recovery, the postpartum depression that hit me like a truck, and he barely noticed. He said he cared, but I never felt it. And anytime I brought it up, he'd brush it off. You're overreacting. You're just playing the victim. You're blowing this way out of proportion. But I wasn't. I tried everything, so many conversations, so many ways of explaining why I felt the way I did, but he refused to acknowledge there was a problem. And the anxiety of it all? It was eating me alive. People kept telling me it was just my postpartum emotions, that I was being sensitive. But how do I make them understand that this wasn't just about hormones? That something was wrong? At first, I thought no way. I mean, when a husband starts acting cold, it's the first thing that comes to mind, right? But I didn't want to believe it. And Mia, in my case, there was a reason he might have been off. My doctor had put me on strict orders: no intimate relationship during pregnancy due to complications. I figured maybe that was why Ethan was distant. I even asked him point blank if that was the problem. Over and over again. He always told me no. It doesn't matter. It's just a small sacrifice for a healthy pregnancy. And honestly, he was convincing. Anytime I got upset about missing that intimacy, he'd be the one reassuring me, telling me it was just a few months, that it wasn't a big deal. Looking back now, I'm amazed at how well he kept up the act. Because the whole time, he was cheating. And my gut had been screaming at me all along. The late-night texts that confirmed my worst fears. Lately, I'd noticed something different about Ethan. He was glued to his phone at all hours, constantly texting, acting weirdly secretive. It was little things at first: keeping his phone on silent, placing it face down whenever I was around, always taking it with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. And yeah, he's always done that, claiming he just watches the news or plays music in the shower, but something felt off. I probably wouldn't have thought much of it if I hadn't caught him up at 3 a.m. on a Friday night. We had gone to bed at our usual time, but when my daughter woke up around 2:31 a.m., I got up to feed her. She was fussy and refused to sleep in her crib, so I cradled her in my arms and lay back down on the bed. That's when I saw it. Ethan, thinking I was asleep, slowly slid his phone out from under his pillow and started texting someone. I couldn't see who it was, but his screen was facing me. I was about to lean in for a closer look, when my baby stirred. The moment Ethan heard her, he immediately shoved his phone under the blanket and pretended to be asleep. And that was the moment I knew. No matter what he said, he was hiding something. But I wasn't about to confront him without proof. We'd had plenty of arguments before, and he always dodged the issue, making me feel like I was overreacting. Another argument wouldn't solve anything. For the next few days, I tried to catch a glimpse of his phone. But he kept it locked down like Fort Knox, always in his pocket, never left unattended. It was impossible to even touch it. So I went for the next best thing. The evidence was in his email. We have a shared PC at home, though Ethan uses it the most. One day, while he was out, I took my chance. He was still logged in. And what I found? It shattered everything. Restaurant bills. Expensive gifts. Hotel bookings. All for someone else. I dug through everything I could find. But strangely, there was no mention of a name. The hotel reservations were all made under his name alone, no details of the other guest. I even tried calling the hotel, hoping to get the info, but they wouldn't budge. Still, I knew. I didn't have a name, but I had proof. And it was overwhelming. I felt so exhausted. I kept breaking down, trying to process it all. But I also knew one thing: I wasn't going to let him get away with this. The ultimate betrayal, my own sister. And then, the truth hit me like a truck. It wasn't just any woman. It was her. My own sister. The person I had loved and protected since the day she was born. My sister, 12 years younger than me. The same sister I had raised alongside my parents. The one I had financially supported for years. And she had been sleeping with my husband. I didn't find out from Ethan. I found out from their messages. And the worst part? She was the one who started it. I'm not saying this to excuse him. Ethan is a lying, cheating bastard. But I saw everything: the way she pushed, how she pursued him. How he initially resisted, and then, piece by piece, gave in. I feel sick even thinking about it. That night, before I wrote my last update, I called her. Because yes, Dumb me, she was the person I had been confiding in all this time. The same person who was backstabbing me. And the minute Ethan got home, I knew something was wrong. He stormed in, went straight to his PC, logged in, and then started yelling at me. "You went through my inbox." I was stunned. There was no trace that I had accessed his email. Which meant someone had tipped him off. And I knew exactly who it was. His phone kept buzzing. Non-stop. I didn't even need to look. I knew who it was. I should have gone outside. I should have listened. But I was so numb, I just sat there, frozen, as he stepped out to take the call. And then I heard him. "I don't care. I don't give AF asterisk asterisk what happens to you. Asterisk." That was for her. And suddenly, everything clicked. I know that sisters sleeping with their siblings' husband isn't unheard of. But in my case, it was unbelievable. She was 12 years younger than me. I had taken care of her like a second mother. When our dad retired, I stepped in. I paid for her education. I made sure she had everything she needed. And Ethan? He was 15 years older than her. He was supposed to be like an older brother figure to her. Never, not once, did I imagine that this could happen. The morning after. The next morning, I went straight to my parents' house. She was still asleep. Because, of course, she was. She still lived with our parents. She didn't work. She had no responsibilities. And guess who was supposed to be paying for her master's degree this fall? Me. Of course, it was me. And now? I had a decision to make. The final betrayal, and my decision to end it all. While she was still sleeping, I did what I had to do. Logging into her email was easy. She was still using the same account I had created for her when she was a teenager. I just needed an OTP, which I casually glanced at from her locked phone screen. That was all it took. Within minutes, I had access to everything: her WhatsApp backups, her Instagram, her Facebook. I transferred every single incriminating message, every chat, every exchange, to my own email. It was still early, 9 a.m. She wouldn't wake up before noon. Meanwhile, my mom was watching my daughter while I sat in my sister's room, collecting evidence of her betrayal. She walked in at one point, eyeing me suspiciously, but she didn't say anything. My mom has always trusted me. She knew I wouldn't do something like this unless there was a damn good reason. Once I had everything I needed, I left. I wanted her to know that I had been in her accounts. I didn't bother hiding my tracks. I wanted her to feel the same helplessness I had felt for months. I wanted her to realize she couldn't outsmart me anymore. The truth, in black and white. When I got home, I sat down and read everything. Thousands of messages. She had been after Ethan from the very beginning. It started small, sending him funny reels, then flirty ones, then outright seductive videos. At first, Ethan barely responded, just laugh emojis, the occasional heart reaction. But then things escalated. The real turning point? My pregnancy. She knew my doctor had advised against intimate relationship for medical reasons. She knew I was struggling with that. And she used it against me. There were hundreds of messages, her teasing him, sending memes about how he must be starving for intimacy. Slowly, she started sending him pictures. First, they were innocent. New outfits, casual selfies. Then, she pushed further. Bolder photos. Pictures that left little to the imagination. And Ethan? He was hesitant at first. There were messages where he actually asked her to stop, where he admitted he was afraid of ruining his marriage. But that doesn't excuse him. Because at the end of the day, he didn't stop it. He had so many chances to shut it down. To come to me and tell me what was happening. To do something other than betray me. But he didn't. And that's why I will never forgive him. Confrontation day. She woke up to dozens of missed calls from me. Then Ethan started calling. I ignored them both. An hour later, Ethan came home. This time, he didn't come in angry. He didn't yell. He didn't try to gaslight me. He just sighed and said, "So, you know everything." I didn't react. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at him and said, "Call her." I wanted to hear it straight from her mouth. Then, I called my parents. While we waited for them to arrive, I deliberately took my time putting my daughter to sleep. I wanted them both to sit there in that unbearable silence, waiting for the inevitable explosion. My parents already had a feeling something bad was coming. When I finally walked back into the room, I didn't look at Ethan. I turned straight to my sister. "Tell them." She just started crying. Sobbing. Apologizing. Repeating that it was a mistake. My parents looked from her to me, confused. "Tell them what?" I didn't say a word. I just waited. And then, finally, she confessed. She admitted everything. She had wanted Ethan because he was gentle. Because he earned well. And then, the real dagger. "I was done being your puppet. You were always bossing me around because you provided for me. I wanted Ethan so I wouldn't have to depend on you anymore." That was when my mother slapped her. Even then, she kept going. She told me how disgusted she felt taking money from me. How she hated the fact that I had control over her life simply because I had been the one supporting her. But the kicker? She still took the money anyway. All while sneaking behind my back with my husband. That was it. I was done. I turned to my parents and said, "Take her out of my house. I don't have a sister anymore." My parents tried to intervene. They knew what this meant. If I cut her off, there was no more financial support. No more money for her education, her living expenses, anything. They wanted me to talk it out. I looked at my sister's face, and all I saw was betrayal. Take her away before I strangle her. And they did. Kicking Ethan out of my life. After they left, Ethan tried, really tried, to convince me. He said he resisted. That he knew it was wrong. That he wanted to tell me. But he still did it. So I just looked him in the eyes and said, "I don't care how long you resisted before you took your pants off for her. The bottom line is, you cheated. And I don't forgive cheaters." Then I told him to pack his things and leave. The divorce papers would be sent soon. He begged me to talk it through. Begged me to let him stay. I didn't budge. When he was finally packed, he asked if he could at least hold our daughter one last time. I said no. He was an absent father. He hadn't cared about her when she was in my womb, and he hadn't cared after she was born. I wasn't going to let him put on a show now, just because he got caught. The aftermath. That evening, my mom came back. She said she was there to support me. But really, she was there to convince me to rethink my decision. She told me I was being harsh. That my sister had seduced Ethan, that he had tried to resist. I just looked at her and said, "He might have resisted at first, but in the end, he still did it. He had every opportunity to tell me. And he didn't. I wasn't about to let them make excuses for him." This happened 2 days ago. Right now, my mom is still here, trying to keep me together. But I'm just waiting for the divorce papers to arrive. So I can erase Ethan from my life, for good. She wanted everything I had. I made sure she ended up with nothing. My sister thought she could take my life. I made sure she didn't even get a fraction of it. It means the world. And for those wondering, I'm in a much better place now. The divorce papers reached Ethan after 20 days. I didn't drag it out. I didn't play games. I just got it done. I walked away with everything that mattered. Full custody of my daughter? Obviously. The house? Mine. I paid for most of the mortgage, so he didn't get a dime of it. Alimony? Didn't want it, didn't need it. Just cutting him off from my life and my daughter's life was enough revenge. Ethan and I had been saving to start a business together. I had my own separate savings for it. Ethan? He saved separately for a house for his parents. Well, good luck to him. His house, his parents' house, his so-called business dreams, none of it is my problem anymore. And then there's my sister, the ultimate joke. She really thought Ethan was my golden ticket. She believed he earned way more than me and that his money was what funded her education, her lifestyle, her minor clothes. She wanted to cut me out completely and go straight to the source. Joke's on her. Ethan was already drowning in his own responsibilities. The second he realized she was using him for money, he ran, and he myopized her more than anyone. Karma hit hard. She lost everything she tried to take from me. My parents tried. But I was done. My parents tried, subtly, of course, to convince me to keep paying for her education. Specifically, her master's program. I shut that down real quick. I paid for her college. She has a degree. She is capable of getting off her ass and earning her own money. That was my final word. She wanted further education. She could figure it out on her own. And surprisingly, my parents didn't push. Because reality was setting in for them too. The last time I spoke to my mom, she told me they had finally given my sister an ultimatum: find a job or figure something out, because they were done covering her expenses. No more minor clothes. No more fancy food. No more finding her passion while living comfortably off other people's money. And honestly, I'm glad. She needed a serious wake-up call. Ethan? I don't know, and I don't care. As for Ethan, I have no idea where he is or what he's doing. During the divorce, he was living with his parents. His mom still calls sometimes to check on my daughter, to ask for pictures. And I send them. She was always kind to me, and I have no reason to punish her for what her son did. But Ethan? He's just gone. No wife. No home. No daughter. Not even his mistress. Karma worked fast. And me? I won. Right now, my focus is only on my daughter. She's growing so fast, trying to say "mommy" in her little gibberish way, amazing me every single day with something new. Motherhood is tough, but it's also beautiful. And I'm cherishing every moment of it. My extended maternity leave is ending soon. I took an extra month. But now, I need to find a full-time nanny before I head back to work.